As a dungeon master, you don't need to incorporate what your players are doing into your campaign. You give them the hooks, they take the hooks, and then roll with it. Nah, not at all. Let's talk about how to actually incorporate your players' input. What I mean by this is there's two types of campaigns. There's the one where the dungeon master does all the heavy lifting and the players interact with the world. And then there's one where the players actually have input on how the world is created. It doesn't have to be the end-all be-all, but having the player input actually takes some time to craft your world with what the players want makes for an amazing, engaging storytelling process. But how do we do that? Let's talk about it. Talk to your players outside the game. This is the first way to actually take your players' input in. You can have conversations that aren't in the game, things they would like to see, and then incorporate those things into the game. So often as dungeon masters, we talk about ways for the characters to find information, ways for people to engage with one another where they are in character, but at the same time, we are playing a game. And there's nothing wrong with taking a second out of character as player to dungeon master for you to tell me, I would really like to have this type of magic item. I'd really like for my player to be able to do these types of things. By taking that type of input, you can increase everyone's fun at the table. Very rarely do out of character conversations actually diminish the game in any way, shape, or form. So this is great for session 0. It's great for talking about it after sessions. There's lots of ways for you to have those conversations with your players outside of the game to figure out what they want their characters to be able to do. Take the time. Then you can input those into your game, creating a more immersive storytelling process for everyone. Link your players' backstories when you can. Now, I know this seems common sense, but what I mean by that is that take a look at the backstories and start building ways to link them into the main story plot that seem organic, not unnatural. Not forcing your players to go and do something, but linking a piece of their backstory into the plot. It doesn't even mean they have to do anything with it, but it's something the character may know, something the character may recognize, something the character may have been part of in the past that actually affects the story going forward. Those are amazing ways for you to actually take a moment and actually build a world together by linking the plots and subplots with a character's backstory. I'm not talking about tying a backstory in to force your characters to go do something. I'm talking about the backstory being part of the plot, something that influences, something the characters are dealing with. When you look at backstories as things that have affected the world that you set in, all of a sudden those characters matter that much more. It doesn't have to be major, but little bitty things. Scenes in the village that have changed. Leaders that are different than they would have been if the character wouldn't have been there. People getting in trouble that wouldn't have been. People outcast from society because of those players. There's lots of things that can come from those, but it's the linking of those backstories that really help solidify the story development process and a way to incorporate your players. Collaborative world building is also something to help engage your players. Where are they from? What would they like to see? What is the area like that they were? Have them describe their hometown, their home village, the area where they're at. Remember, this is a fantasy world and things don't have to necessarily match together completely. In fact, there can be entirely different climates that are separated by a mountain range. And those are some things to remember. This is a fantasy world. Allow your players to help build part of your world from where they were, for what the hometown looked like, to what the political systems were. Some people will want to engage in this process, some people won't. But those that do, it brings a very fulfilling process. And it takes a lot of heavy lifting off of your shoulders as a dungeon master. It may never be a place that you actually go to or visit. However, it does flush out your world, especially if each player takes a little interest in where they're from, or maybe part of the cult that they're part of, or the religion they're part of. Remember, you don't have to stick just to the rules. You can incorporate what your players want just as much. Reward creativity. If you want your players to be involved, reward their creativity. They may not always get exactly what they're looking for, but when they are thinking outside the box, make sure that you help reward that. You could even change how the world functions, or if they come up with some amazing way magic should work, reward that. You can incorporate those ideas into your own world, into your own world building, as far as how to utilize those concepts. Taking player input can affect the rules, it can affect the world, it can affect your setting, and it can affect classes, and it can affect everything out there. This is not about the rule of cool. This is simply saying, hey, that's a really creative idea for this campaign, and for this, we're going to reward that. We're going to do something with that. Now, I like to have conversations both in character and out of character to let people know how to expect this reward. Just because you come up with something this campaign does not mean that it's going to go or be a rule going forward in all of our campaigns or all of our settings. Exceptions are okay, but I like to reward those creativities and creating those exceptions. You have to be careful. If you're going to reward creativity with one player, if one player keeps trying to break the rules and be creative, make sure you're not hindering other players as well. Food for thought on that one. Character-driven plot twists are one of my favorite ways to where I can take subplots and plots and make it so one character affects that subplot in a certain way. This is truly taking character input, making them feel like their actions matter. Now, understanding characters' backstories and motivations help with this character-driven plot twists, I should say. When a character is the central piece or key that's pivotal for a subplot or a plot twist, then it makes them feel special. It also makes them feel like their actions can matter. Here's the thing. You can't make them the centralized focus and then make it so what they do cannot affect change. This happens a lot when we're like, oh, I have a story and I'm going to tell from story A to B, and the character here is going to have to do this to get here. We have to be careful with that. That really is the true aspect of railroading, is when we take our players and we try to direct them to a certain outcome that we see. If we're going to allow our players to be part of the plot twist, we have to do just that. We have to make sure their actions, their responses to this world matter in that plot twist. So when it comes to taking player feedback and player input, we need to make sure that we are incorporated into the game, but not also playing favorites, right? We can't say creativity works for this player, but it doesn't work for this player. And what happens is a lot of times we will reward creativity, but we reward creativity or inputs that we like as the dungeon master that fits with our narrative. If we're doing that and we have a couple of players that are giving us input and we're adding this to our campaign, we have a couple of players that are not, we have to switch our focus to those players as well to make sure that they are getting what they're wanting out of this. So while taking player input is good, it can show favoritism if we're not careful of balancing it across the table. That's all I wanted to leave you with when it comes to player input on your table, is make sure that if you're changing rules, if you're taking input, if you're doing character backstory changes or rewarding creativity, make sure we're doing that equally across our table and not showing favorites. I've watched it happen on a lot of tables, so that's the warning. But as always, whatever works for your table, make sure that you do more of it. And I hope you're inspired by these things. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. And again, we'll see you next time.